김치는 인도미 단서민어 주서 오징어 할리 박대 대사 성주목 방첨 사족의 해운박
Welcome, one and all. This session, the outlook for the accommodation sector, is an in-depth discussion of one part of the travel industry and its path to recovery. I'm Laurie Myers, and I'll be your moderator today. We at the Global Travel and Tourism Resilience Council, part of the Jacobs Media Group since our launch in 2016, strive to provide a platform for dialogue regarding the furtherance of better preparedness, crisis management, resiliency, and recovery. In that vein, we set up and participate in events globally, working with partners such as the WTM to provide important thought leadership. Today's subject matter around the accommodation sector is particularly germane given the pressure the sector is under from the COVID-19 crisis. Our panel consists of professionals who represent different aspects of the sector, providing our attendees, all of you, with hopefully a wide outlook, as wide an outlook as possible on how the sector is performing and will perform towards recovery. First, to set the stage, we went to the world's largest commercial real estate and hotel advisory company, CBRE. With over 80,000 employees in close to over 500 locations around the world, CBRE provides itself on offering solutions to property owners, investors, and operators. With us today from London, from the London office, is Joe Stather, who is Associate Director at CBRE's Investment Advisory Group. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Laurie. Thank you.
Representing a global chain point of view is Eva Chan. Eva is head of feasibility and viability for Wyndham Hotels, which means she's responsible for underwriting analysis and valuation. Welcome, Eva.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And then founder from the boutiques luxury sector end of the market, we have Michael Struck, CEO and founder of Ruby Hotels, based out of Munich and the creator of the lean luxury model, operating 8 properties in Europe, soon to launch another 17 in Europe and in Asia. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Laurie. Hi, everybody.
And finally, we have Moritz van Petersdorf-Kampen, who is the founder and owner of SweetPad, headquartered in Berlin. SweetPad is a technology solution for hotels that reflects the desires of consumers and addresses the needs of owners. Welcome, Moritz.
Hi there.
So I'd like to start out the discussion today by laying out the facts. So drawing from his considerable resources, Joe will set the scene from a current performance and predictive point of view. Joe, over to you.
Thanks, Laurie. I'm just going to share my screen if I can. And hopefully after that great introduction, I can do this presentation justice. So just a few slides from me, really, as Laurie said, to set the scene. And ultimately, I'd like to start with some positivity. So here we have international tourist arrivals from 1950 through to 2019 by global region. And of course, we've had several recessions over this period, not limited to the global financial crisis and other shocks such as 9/11 and SARS. Yet the impact of any of these events on the overall growth of the global travel market has been minimal, as you can see, and demand has always bounced back. Now, I think what is striking is the acceleration in the volume of travel growth that we can see from 2010 onwards, notwithstanding this year, of course. I mean, travel has become the new social currency. A greater amount of spend on leisure and experiences has taken tourism and hotel demand to new highs in the past decade. And we've seen a great supply side response as well, with cool new hotel brands and concepts. And of course, there's nothing to suggest that this trend won't continue as we emerge from COVID-19. In fact, just look at the unwillingness of people to forgo their summer vacations this year, despite the severity of the pandemic. That said, Oxford Economics are forecasting a 65% decline in international arrivals for 2020 as of October. The general environment is incredibly tough right now for tourism service providers, including the hotel industry. But not all hotel markets have been impacted to the same extent, or indeed will follow the same recovery trajectory. And this is driven largely by the exposure of hotels and hotel markets to different travel segments. So in the next few slides, I'm hoping to briefly set the scene in this regard to tee up our panel discussion, which will of course follow. So here we have the tourism economics forecast for the European region. And on the left, we have the forecast recovery of international arrivals broken down by short, mid and long haul, just for the benefit of those of you which aren't familiar. Short haul is less than a 3-hour flight and long haul is over 6 hours. Mid haul, of course, anything that falls in between the two. And then we've got domestic travel as well. And on the right, we have a breakdown of arrivals by business and leisure. So starting with the left-hand chart, you can see that the near-term outlook, according to our friends at Tourism Economics, is that tourists will remain much closer to home in the short term, traveling either domestically or to short-haul destinations, causing these two travel segments to recover relatively quickly. But this domestic substitution will not be enough to support hotel performance in many markets, and I'll elaborate on this in the following slides. So turning to the chart on the right, you can see how business travel is predicted to be the most severely impacted by the pandemic relative to leisure, which isn't unsurprising based on the impact of 9/11 and the global financial crisis, for example, where business travel was generally more sensitive to market shocks such as these. And whilst face-to-face contact remains key for a lot of business activity, the financial impact of the pandemic on many firms and the adoption of virtual platforms for communication will no doubt drag on the recovery of business travel and corporate hotel demand. And although it isn't split out in this particular data, it's MICE and group travel that we expect to take the longest to recover. The possibility of ongoing restrictions on group size, perception of risk relating to group gatherings, and the long lead time to organise large meetings and events will no doubt weigh heavy on the recovery of these particular segments. So on to my next slide. And here I'm plotting occupancy for the period July to September 2020 for key EMEA markets. And actual occupancy is on the x-axis and the year-on-year variance is shown on the y-axis. And in general, you can see how much the hotel industry is hurting right now, with most of these markets operating at sub 30% occupancy. I've gone to the bother of labeling a few of the cities, and it's very clear that those markets which have been the most stable and strong performing historically are those most in difficulty at present. And that includes the likes of London, Paris, Barcelona, and Rome. And these markets historically have benefited from a diverse source markets and demand drivers, a balance of leisure, corporate, and MICE demand that has resulted in strong 7-day and year-round business, and of course insulated against external market shocks. But at the moment, their exposure to international corporate and events-related demand in particular is really working against them. Conversely, it's the domestic and/or leisure-focused markets that have performed relatively strongly. So Brighton on Britain's south coast and the medieval city of York have benefited from a staycation boom in the UK. And Hamburg in Germany, which is predominantly a domestic-driven market, has been comparatively buoyant relative to other German cities. And I'd also like to point out London luxury, the lowest occupancy market at just 4.6% over the period analysed. In terms of how different tiers of the market have performed, we have seen the limited service sector outperform the mid-market, which in turn has outperformed the luxury market. It could be argued that luxury hotels are more exposed to international demand, and their high-end clientele is perhaps more risk-averse. In a challenging economic environment, we also generally see a degree of demand trade down to lower market tiers. Now, also working in the favour of limited service hotels is a lower cost base, which leads me on to my next slide. So whilst the impact of the pandemic on occupancy and top-line rooms revenue looks painful, the challenge to bottom-line profitability is even more acute. And this particular slide demonstrates the regional impact of COVID-19 on hotel RevPAR, TrevPAR, which is total revenue per available room, and GOPPAR, which is gross operating profit per available room. Now, hotels, particularly those which are full service, are highly operationally leveraged. And we have seen some operators find ways to reduce operating costs, unfixed fixed costs, and of course, government support, including furlough, has helped. But many hotels are making marginal profits or a loss, and this is before any payment of rent or debt. Now, to get through this, hotel owners, operators, and financiers will have to work together, strategizing and identifying ways to further reduce cost, consolidate, reposition, and carefully allocate CapEx, for example. This will be key to survival, especially as we enter what is looking like a particularly difficult end to the year. Now, whilst the impact, So here we have the Google search popularity for the term hotel in several European countries. Google searches are a good proxy for real-time hotel demand, given that most of the bookings that we're seeing at the moment are through transient channels. And that bounce we experienced through July, August, and September, which was primarily driven by staycations, has come to something of an abrupt end with the announcement of a second wave and further lockdown measures across Europe. Now, of course, rising unemployment and financial struggles in the private sector are, of course, going to weigh on travel decisions too. And the prospect of further waves and lockdowns prior to a vaccine won't help to alleviate short booking lead times, which will make business planning and budgeting very difficult. But we should be buoyed by just how quick demand did return for certain destinations once it was permitted to do so in July and August. And to discuss this in more detail, I'll hand you back to Laurie to kick off our panel discussion. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Joe. So it's a mixed bag, guys. We can clearly see past performance indicates that we're going to see a rebound if and when things open up, but we have to talk about the short term. First, I'd like to get some reaction from our panelists if they all agree with you, given the fact that the numbers of the presentation was focusing around the EMEA region. Let's go over to you, Eva. What's your reaction to Joe's findings?
I think absolutely, I agree that recovery start with domestic and with leisure. So, for example, a lot of our hotels, they are in motorway destinations, they're in secondary cities, and we have seen a comeback in the last few months. STR also published a report, and that occupancy for hotels in regional destinations are constantly performing higher than gateway cities. And this is the same in the UK, in Germany, Italy, and Spain. And also because we've got a large number of our hotels are in the US, the trend is also seen over there. We have seen a consumer demand shift to beach location, national parks, and mountain states. So in that respect, I agree with Joe's findings.
And do you think that the Asian market is also seeing activity in the more domestic, smaller cities?
Definitely. So I will split it Asia Pacific into China and the rest of Asia Pacific. So in China, and it's also because over 90% of the travel demand is domestic. So we have seen a very strong comeback in that respect. And as well as occupancy, to be honest, for October year to date is almost back to last year level. In terms of the rest of Asia, it largely depends on their travel demand. So places like Australia and Japan, we have seen like a comeback, a recovery, but whereas Thailand, which is highly reliant on international travelers, it's struggling, it's still struggling.
And conversely, in the United States?
Oh, United States, because again, as you can see, if you remember the first chart from Joe's presentation about international travel, US, again, I think 90% of their travelers are domestic. So that's why you will see pretty much a stronger recovery than EMEA.
Thank you. Michael, over to you. Michael, I know that you've got a very unique business model in the lean luxury sector. I wonder what your thoughts are on the findings that Joe showed us.
Our experience reflects exactly what Joe showed. So our Hamburg hotel, for instance, and Vienna, they came back rather quickly based on domestic and on leisure demand. London and Munich, contrary to that, took a much longer to recover. And London, indeed, is even until the beginning of the second lockdown, was still very heavily hit. What we did see, and I think that is something that Joe mentioned, which wasn't in the slides though, it's important to note the difference between the price tiers. So hotels like ours that, even though we offer lean luxury, are priced affordably at around a mid-scale to budget price point, enjoyed a quicker recovery. And so that if you compare that with the average markets, we were always about 10 to 15% percentage points in occupancy ahead of the average market.
So discounting is going to help you be able to get through this period?
It's not discounting. I think it's the price value ratio that you offer. And in times like these, when people go for the best value they can get, those offers are better off that are targeted. We are a niche concept. Lean luxury is not for everybody, but for those guests that we attract, they get the best value out of it. So I think that is also going to continue through the medical crisis and all the way through to the economic crisis that we'll face afterwards.
Thanks, Michael. Just a message to our viewers. Please feel free to drop in questions in the chat box. And also, we'll post a poll question up here, which we'd like you to answer. Would offering a product that fortified safety and security concerns, as well as ensured the highest standard of COVID-19 care, including an option to be returned home, increase travelers' confidence and their willingness to book hotels? And what is a reasonable cost for such a service? So we'd like to get your feedback on that. And back to you, Michael, one more question. You are expanding. You've got 4 hotels planned for 2021 and a second property in London, I believe, in 2022. Are any of these is any of the current situation changing your plans?
Not really. And indeed, it's 2 in London that are coming up. Of the 17 that we're opening, the majority is going to be in cities where we perceive the medical crisis to be over by that time, save for London, basically, because as Joe explained, indeed, those cities where you don't have such a high long-haul source market quota, recovery can be expected to be earlier. And lead times in hotel development, as you know, are 2 to 3 years. So the properties that we're signing up now, and the properties that we have in our pipeline to be opened, will open at a time when the medical crisis is over and when we're in an economic recession. Obviously, I think the learnings from the great financial crisis were that indeed the shift of demand from upper upscale and upscale hotels down to mid-scale and budget actually benefited those concepts, so that the crisis can be an opportunity. And that's indeed what we're seeing and what we saw already in the first recovery.
That's good news. I'm gonna go over to Moritz now, who can talk to us a little bit about SweetPad's findings. So SweetPad is working across Europe and the Middle East in dozens of chains. Moritz, can you give a brief overview of how your technology is facilitating this period, particularly for the owners, and also communicating what consumers need?
Well, sure. So generally speaking, what we do is we replace all the paper collateral that you'd find in a hotel room, but also including the phone and the remote control with in-room tablets. So they sit in the room and the guest can start using it to purchase hotel services, but also to purchase external services. I think at the end of the day, what we're doing is it's hotel to guest communication. And I think that also brings me to what the benefits in the current situation are, is really that at the end of the day, right now, there's more to communicate than ever because things are changing every single day. Hotels operations are changing every single day because you have to adapt from a 70, 80% occupancy to a 10, 20, 30% occupancy. And many, many changes come along with that. So what hotels then do through our solution is, for instance, hotels are moving or decided to give the guest the chance to decide whether they want to have their room cleaned or not. Because obviously when housekeeping staff comes in, that's a risk factor for the guest at the end of the day to get infected, and you don't want your housekeeping stuff to become a super spreader in that sense. So you can opt out of that. Other hotels, especially the chains, have decided to move away from housekeeping for stayovers entirely and decided to move to a model where you only get your room cleaned upon request. So that would be another thing that you could easily activate or deactivate through a digital solution. Another thing that we've seen, so coming back to Joe's presentation, obviously we don't have the booking figures, but what we can see from a little more than 1,000 hotels and the usage statistics that we see in those properties, obviously, as Joe said, extremely different from market to market to market. So Spain is completely different to Germany, is different to the UK. And then obviously in the different regions, you have many differences. But what we see is, and I think that's actually an opportunity for the industry, is that the hotel becomes pretty much a bit of a hub for the guest stay, because the guest is a bit more reluctant to leave the property. In order to consume, I don't know, usually you wouldn't have dinner in a hotel restaurant. So many people, especially in city locations, they like to go out, they like to experience something else, but that's changing to an extent now. So what we have seen on our solution is that the traffic for room service, for instance, has been skyrocketing on our device. So that's something that you could purchase through the tablet and then have it delivered to your room. So the demand for that in relation to the occupancy is really, really increasing by a lot. That being said, Joe also talked about profitability in that segment, and obviously to provide room service, to provide other hotel services at a 20-30% occupancy is extremely challenging, which brings me to my last point, that I think flexibility there is super important. So we have other hotels that decided to move away from offering their own room service and integrated local restaurants as partners. So they can still provide the service, but don't have the cost base. And the restaurant is happy about it as well, because it increases their demand. So yeah, it's I think mainly in the times right now, it's mainly about the flexibility that our solution or digital communication solutions or technology in general offers in comparison to doing things the old way.
So one of the things that Joe mentioned was that financiers and hoteliers or franchisees have to begin to work together to be able to get through this. And one of the requirements really is the reduction of overhead. Do you have any idea or any statistics on, once your technology is deployed by a hotel, what the reduction in overhead can amount to?
Yeah, so I think the biggest cost saver is really the screen option feature that I talked about, where the guest can waive daily housekeeping if they want to. We see on average, depending on the property, depending on the average length of stay, but that we can save somewhere between 0.8 to 1.5 housekeepings on a monthly basis. And if a housekeeping, I don't know, in London will cost you through an external company £10 or something like that, that is something that you can just save upon the push of a button, really. So that's, I think, one of the core features there. Room service I touched on. So room service is right now an extremely important feature, especially in upscale hotels for many guests, because they don't want to leave the property. You can externalize that through partners as well. One chain customer of ours actually came up with a pretty good idea for their telephone support and solutions. So they are running the phone functionality through the SuitePad as well. And now what they are doing is they are wiring every guest request to a central place where they are answering all the questions, either through a chat or through the phone, through one or two people that are at hand 24/7, but were through that significantly able to reduce their staff in the properties that were still open. And the last thing would probably be a digital checkout solution. So which does two things at once. So one is it also prevents, sounds a bit strange to say, but it prevents human interaction, which is something that we're usually always striving for, but these days we got to be a bit careful with. And at the same time, obviously, it delivers additional efficiency through basically due to the fact that the guest can do the checkout by himself and doesn't need to go downstairs and wait in line, which is more efficient for the hotel, just as well as for the guest, obviously. But those would be among the things that one could do with a more digital approach.
Right, bringing down the overhead. Over to Eva and Michael. Do you see the efforts as suggested by Joe, working with financiers to reduce overhead, working with technology companies to do that, will help get over this period? Are similar activities being deployed in your companies? Eva, I'll go to you first.
Yep, definitely. So what we have, if we have just launched an app, a Wyndham app, which allows online direct booking as well as check-in and check-out, which is very similar to what Maltese is saying. We have also launched a direct business booking platform, which allow business travelers to directly just book and with a monthly bill. So that also facilitates more direct bookings, which reduce costs on OTAs. So these are some of the measures that we are doing, which is in line with technology advancement to help our partners to save costs.
Mm-hmm. And if I may add, exactly the same things are available, have been available with Ruby. Indeed, even pre-COVID, we always took the approach to digitalize and indeed to automate what you can behind the scenes and in front of the scenes where it affects the guest's customer journey. We made it optional. So even from the start, you were able to check in online. There was no checkout. We've been working intensively also on something that is not so much in the limelight, but is extremely important in times like these, which is automating the back end. Because if you think about what these crises do to the P&L, they alert you to the fact that the hotel industry is one that is very heavy on fixed costs. But there are ways around that, because a lot of things don't need to be done the way we used to do them for 30 years, if you look closely. So we've digitalized and automated large parts of procurement, of accounting, of HR, recruitment even. So working with solutions that pre-screen applicants digitally based on OCR technology, technologies that actually recognize bills, so there's no hard copy bills coming into the hotel anymore. They're all scanned and processed automatically in the background. And the same goes through to auto centralization. Something that can save a lot of fixed costs as you think about it, taking all those expensive leadership and managerial positions out of the hotel where you don't need them. We've even taken the step to take out the front office. So everything from behind the scenes, purchasing, HR, finance, but also marketing functions, sales, reservations, all the way through to the front office, in our case, are centralized and semi-automated or automated, so that the payroll effect is one that is 50% less. And that really goes for reducing your break-even point. And that's what we all have to consider at this stage. When is the level where you break even? We break even at typically 40 to 45% occupancy, where a usual hotel would take 65 to 70. And that's where this investment in technology and this extra mile in process design really pays off. And at the end of the day, it's something that benefits the guests just as much. First of all, it's because you can offer a better price-value relationship without compromising resilience and sustainability. But it also means that digitalizing gives your guests usually the option, and Morris already alluded to that, to avoid physical contact, where at times like these, you want to avoid them. So check in, check out, yes, we've mentioned those, pre-ordering, but the same even goes through to new types of service delivery and marketing. So for instance, our digital concierge service that gives you all the information at the touch of a fingertip, special offers, etc. That is so that you can avoid having contact with your classical concierge, but still have the same guest experience.
Right. So if we look away from the technology, I noticed on your site and sort of studying up on how Ruby's operating, you refer to a membership program. So are you asking your past travelers to join a club for a fee, or is this to provide additional benefits? I noticed that the Member Flex program is offered. Are these, is there a strategy behind offering a membership program to your guests, and how does that work?
Yeah. Well, membership in our case, first of all, comes for free. And it's not about earning loyalty points. It's about earning preference. It's about getting the preferences right, so that you can get a more customized experience. We believe that personalization is to our guests more important than saving a few bucks, because I failed to explain a little bit on what lean luxury is. It's about getting the luxury right for that type of people, we call our guests the cosmopolitan avant-garde, that don't place a lot of emphasis on traditional attributes of luxury, such as a concierge or a valet service or a marble lobby or a gold tap in the bathroom. It's about those things that improve you as a person, that give you a meaningful experience, that promote interaction with people that are like-minded, and at that stage also gives you more options. It's about optionality at the end of the day. And what we achieve for our members is that they can choose their favorite room, that we always know what type of setting in the room they would like in terms of lighting, heating, etc. It's about giving them the right recommendations in what we have as bar programming, as events, as a platform outside of the hotel. We want people to stay part of Ruby even when they leave the hotel. So you're still part of Ruby when you cross the doorstep, and indeed when you leave the hotel for good, and your stay is over, we still want to keep in touch. And that's what this membership program is about.
Wonderful. And I'll just ask you one more thing before I go over and ask Eva the same questions. But you're behind you. You have started using some of your spaces as workstations.
Workspaces, yeah.
Workspaces. Can you sort of share with the audience as well the purpose behind that? Obviously, is it alternate revenue stream, or is it changing fixed costs to non-fixed costs?
Indeed, it's all of that and some more. We've launched Workspaces as a business segment of ours. We did that 3 years ago, and this used to be a separate business. Now we've decided that we only want to do them in our hotels. So joined with the hotel operations for operational reasons, as a lot of functions are shared, such as maintenance and cleaning. But foremost, for the guests, in order to give the guests a better experience, offering them what we believe will be the future of travel, that when you're on business travel or on leisure, you still have at your discretion, you can still have a fully functional, highly efficient desk, and even a private office that you would book with your room. So in our case, it's easily bookable online, even for day uses, and you get the key, just like you get your hotel key on your app, you get the key to the offices. Now, that extends obviously to the experiential side of it. Co-cooking, co-dining, as you see behind me, this is one of our workspaces here in Munich, is at the heart of how we create community. And if you think about hotel guests that come back repeatedly, and I think this is something that we will see post-COVID as a result of home offices spreading. People will spend their present stays that they have to stay in the big city before they leave back to their more rural home place. They will stay in hotels where they feel that it's more than a hotel stay. It's being part of a community of like-minded people. You can cook, you can celebrate together, and that's something that we are affording to by bringing these two worlds together. Co-workers and guests of the hotel that essentially have the same in mind.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eva. Wyndham has over, I think, about 20 brands or so. And the Wyndham philosophy is to make travel affordable for everyone. I'm wondering if some of the activities that Ruby is engaging in are also being engaged in with across the Wyndham brands.
Well, so as a background, so we are the largest hotel franchise company in the world with over 9,000 hotels. And our specialty is in the mid-scale and economy segment, which our goal is to provide a comfortable and clean stay for our guests. So over in the last few months, what we have seen is, even though business travel has been under tremendous pressure, we have seen business travel in our hotels. And that is because it depends on what segment of business travel you're looking at. So for us, it's the everyday business travelers that come from the construction industry, logistics, manufacturing, railway. These are all the industry that is not impacted by the pandemic, and they still need to go travel. And these are the business travel that we're capturing, and we are seeing that will come on in the next few months or years. The other sector is in EMEA that we're heavily focusing and promoting on attracting SME business, because we see that this is one of the most agile, the business sector, which will drive domestic business. So hence we're doing promotions on that. And in terms of leisure travel, a lot of our travelers, they are coming for family visit, or they are staying for one night, because a lot of our hotels, they are in motorway destinations. So they will stay there for a night and on to go to their final travel destinations. And that's something that we will continue to focus on. And I think in the future, something that we are promoting is hybrid meetings. So the idea is, because again, a lot of people think meetings are going to go away. Yes, large scale events and fairs might take some time to come back. But I think from this pandemic, we realized that we are all social animals. We needed face-to-face interaction. Well, Zoom works fine, but then we need a bit more than that. And in the interim, what we could do is people that are in the same location, they could meet up in the hotel. They can meet up in the meeting room, and with the facilities, with the technology, with the conference technology that we have, they could have a virtual meeting from their counterparts in other countries. So this is something that we're heavily promoting in the next few months.
And are there any special, are you taking the route of discounting, or are you taking the route of value-added service providing, or what's the philosophy during this period?
I think the same, even in the mid-scale and economy sector, every sector is trying to avoid discounting, because that will dilute the value of your brand. So whereas there is still a little level of discounting, it depends on your length of stay. So let's say if you stay for 5 more nights, you will get more of a discount. And that's our philosophy.
So you don't expect any major movements in RevPAR going forward?
It will, well, I don't really have a crystal ball, but then I guess rate will be under pressure, but then it will be more, I think the changes in RevPAR will come more from occupancy than rate.
Okay. Joe, over to you. I don't want you to think that you're getting away with it just because you did all the work in the background. Joe, so tell us, do you, from the other owners and hotel companies that you're advising, do you see similar trends from what we're hearing from Wyndham and Ruby?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the focus on tech at the moment is huge, and there's some great innovation in that space. One question that, hearing what my colleagues on the panel had to say, that I wanted to ask to all of them is that, historically, the hospitality industry has always been a people's industry, and great experiences have largely been created by people offering great service. If you look on TripAdvisor, so many of the positive comments are about fantastic service. And that's what's created memorable stays. But in this shift that we're seeing at the moment towards the use of technology and reducing payroll, do you think the industry will ever come back out of that, or do you think we'll kind of get fixed on that low payroll cost that we're seeing at the moment as a result of technology? And is there a potential that we'll move away from being a people industry and offering those kind of experiences?
I think if I may take that question, we should certainly not take that route. What we're advocating is 2 things. Behind the scenes, where it doesn't affect the customer experience, you can digitalize, you can automate. And in front of the scenes, you can make it an option, but you certainly shouldn't take the option away. So that indeed, we try to use technology in order to improve what you have as memorable experience with people. Because, for instance, give you one example, our hosts, as we call them, it's a much more multifunctional, much more diverse role, which actually enables us to attract true characters, people that you can meet at eye level and that will be capable socially, emotionally to keep a real conversation going. And why is that? Because we take all the administrative burden away from them, which, by the way, means we don't require them to have a vocational hotel training. They can come from all walks of life. They're really fascinating characters that work for Ruby. Which I have to say I'm really proud of every day. It actually makes me get up in the morning and smile in times like these, and you can tell that's saying a lot. But that is exactly what technology can do. It can give us the leeway and the freedom to have our people on site work with what they love to do most and what's most important, which is caring about our guests, not about some administrative process.
Maybe
Thank you,
just
Michael.
one thing to add to that. I absolutely agree. So I think those things that where it doesn't provide value, that a human does it, should be things that can be automated and can be done through digital solutions. So I don't know. There are certain questions that always come up at the reception. Those are the kind of things that if you can provide value to those questions by giving a great hint about a new restaurant that just opened up down the street, it should probably be answered by a human, and a human can be doing that much better than technology. But for those repetitive things, technology is probably a lot better and also a lot cheaper. The only thing is, when we got started with Sweetpad 7 years ago, I had so many individual hoteliers that I was sitting down with, be it in Austria, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Italy, wherever, and we sat down and we introduced in Munich, and we introduced our solution. And there are those that are extremely digital savvy, and those that always had this personal contact and personal communication as a reason not to invest into technology. And I think what the crisis right now shows is that this really, those that get through this crisis in a good way are those that have invested over the last couple of years and have set up their systems in a way that it works properly. But for the others that now hear that we're still going to go back to a people's industry, that doesn't mean that it's going to be people's industry only. So it will mean that those things will coexist, just like we're not only going to have Zoom meetings, but also Mice Business. But also Mice Business is not going to come back next year as it was last year, because many people have realized that solutions like the one we're using right now are not the worst thing in the world. And I think it's going to be both. And the hoteliers hearing it now should, whatever kind of solution they're going to go for at the end of the day, but should have that in the back of their mind that this technology aspect is not going to go away.
Right, allowing them to pivot as well in times of need. Eva, do you want to weigh in on that?
Just a quick comment. I think a lot of the technology is helping us to get the guests to the door. And once they are in the hotel, they wanted the experience. Let's say they have a question to ask the concierge, they're at the restaurant. I think all these, they are experienced. The booking tools, the check-in, check-out, they are helping them to get to the door. And I'm sure that there was always a demand for service.
Of course. I'm going to shift this a little bit and say that, okay, so we are deploying technology to help us manage overhead and adjust our cost parameters during this period. One of the things that comes into play is the conversation about sustainability. Most people say it's a terrible time to be talking about sustainability because we're just trying to keep the lights on. But I'd like each of you to give me your perspective. Is this the time to be able to introduce sustainability and make sure that it becomes mainstream in the accommodation sector? Eva.
Well, I think this is definitely a hot topic because we've got a newly appointed sustainability director in this area. And from all of the surveys that you have seen that are flying around, consumer surveys, sustainability is in the top criteria that a traveler is looking for. And hence, that's why we as a hotel company, we should, or just hospitality industry as a whole, should look at it as a priority and see all the masks, all the plastic they've been using during this pandemic. I think this should be put as a priority.
And Moritz, I think you've got some feedback on this subject as well, because the owners that you deal with are looking for sustainability technology to take them through to sustainability. Isn't that correct?
I think generally speaking it is. I do understand those owners and hoteliers today that are worried about their economic existence and where sustainability is not the first thing that they have in mind. And I understand where it's coming from, but at the same time, it remains the biggest necessity. I mean, like Michael said, there's a medical crisis right now. There's going to be a recession afterwards. And we'll still be talking about this year, 2020, and 5 years down the line. But our biggest problem for the century is around sustainability. It's not just climate change. Sustainability is much more. But climate change is obviously a super, super big topic within that. And so every decision, also for for us as a company that we're making today should have at least that you should at least have it in the back of your mind and think about how can you adjust your decision here in a sustainable way to make it part of your everyday processes, because it's not going to go away. It's going to be the mega topic of the upcoming century. And that's why it's still, thanks God, a priority for our customers. And I believe there are things that bring those two worlds together, where you can save money, where you can do things in a new way and still be sustainable and be attractive. Like I mentioned, this green option feature, for instance, where the guest can waive housekeeping. It doesn't make sense that you get your room cleaned every single day. You don't clean your apartment at home every single day, and at least I don't. And I think those kind of things really show that it's not either or, but you have to look for things where this goes together. And I think similar to technology, this is going to be the other topic that's going to be way more important in the future. Sorry, yeah.
I'd just like to add some examples to that, because I'm completely with you, Moritz. It's for me, being sustainable is a matter of the heart, because I have 3 children. And as you know, many of the issues we're facing are some where it's high time. There are points of no return. And once we pass those, there is no going back. So we can't just stop thinking about sustainability just because there's something much more immediate in front of us. I think we have to keep that long-term point of view. And that's an emotional thing to me, because that's the future of our children. The other part is my mind, and I think there's no contradiction in being sustainable at the same time making money, because as Moritz said, energy efficiency benefits both sides, both bills. The same is true for making prudent decisions on your housekeeping, and we have a green option. We've had it for a while, even pre-COVID. And even through to plastic consumption, it doesn't cost more. It's just keeping it in your mind. And for our target group, for our guests, it's actually something that hasn't gone away as a priority. They wouldn't book a hotel if it wasn't sustainable, and I completely am with them on that.
Okay, I'm going to, we are closing in on the Q&A portion. I'm going to ask you one more question before we go over to the questions that are being posted. Is government helping the sector enough? How is it helping it, and how could it help more? Over to you first, Michael.
It's helping with short-term work, or furlough as it's called in the UK, programs. That is the one thing that's available to all. There were obviously also programs targeted at keeping businesses afloat by providing liquidity through subsidized credit programs, but those have only been available, frankly, either to companies that didn't need the money or those that were really small. The players in the middle, such as like ours, we were left with the shareholders substitute footing the bill, and myself and my shareholders, we've invested heavily in order to keep our business as well as our growth ongoing. What could be done and has started is that governments take responsibility for the measures that they've taken, because the hotels are not suffering from the medical crisis. They're largely suffering from the restrictions that were taken by governments in order to manage that crisis, not all of which are really understandable, because I still fail to see why a hotel guest who's surrounded by 4 walls is an infection spreader. I would say that's really just making us a means to an end in order to avoid people, to disincentivize people to travel, but there would be other ways to do that rather than just shutting down hotels, frankly. But as they are taking responsibility now, there are now some fixed cost aid programs in Austria, for instance, where we're operating. Germany is now implementing, first time now, fortunately for the second wave, as they didn't have it for the first, a subsidy program where they substitute based on last year's revenues. I think what would be most important is to address the key cost item that hotels have that they cannot address without the help of the legislative, which is our rents. At least in continental Europe, we work on a lease model. They're different, obviously, from the Anglo-Saxon world where you have management contracts, but at the end of the day, it's the capital costs that are tied to your real estate, where it's a matter of reassessing the rules so that all parties can help each other. Our landlords would love to help hoteliers, but they're managing other people's money. So as long as there's no clear direction from the government saying, okay, let's work as in Greece, let's work as in Italy, where there's a rule and it's 50, 25, 25, meaning hoteliers pay 50%, 25% is what the government subsidizes, and 25% is what the landlords have as a rent reduction. In Italy, it's 60-20-20, same story. That should be a general rule where you have leases. And I'm not just talking hospitality. This is something that you should think about for commercial leases. And it doesn't have to stop there. I'm not trying to push the ball over to the real estate parties. Those are our partners. We work very closely. But I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to those banks to those that finance the real estate owners, and that's the banks. And at the end of the day, again, here, legislation would help, that would allow these banks in order then to defer principal payments, to cut interest rate payments for a certain period of time. At times of negative interest rates, that shouldn't be so much of a discussion, but currently we're just left out in the dry, and that needs to change.
I hear you. Joe, you're advising these owners. Are you advising the government how they can step in and help with these kind of comments that you're hearing from Michael?
I mean, I would absolutely agree with Michael's points there. I think that the lease point is absolutely fundamental to a lot of operators surviving the pandemic. There's no doubt that institutional investors, banks, don't want to be left holding a trading hotel asset. They're not hoteliers, but at the moment, the rules that are in place really aren't helping that communication and that flexibility that's needed between all parties. So I think, yeah, absolutely agree with him there. And certainly on the furlough side of things, or the kind of the job retention scheme that we see in a lot of countries. I mean, if you take the UK, for example, 72,000 accommodation and food services businesses furloughed staff, which is 57% of all businesses in the UK, which is a staggering stat. And that was to the end of July, and that came at a cost to the UK Treasury of 5.2 billion. So that's been a huge shield for the hospitality sector in the UK, and we know that that's the case in other European countries as well. I think what really is key to build on that support is that, you know, many hospitality businesses across Europe are likely to take longer to recover than most other business sectors, it's probably fair to say. And I'm sure that a lot of hotel owners and operators would really appreciate and benefit from a bit more certainty around the more specific tailored support that will be offered to the sector as some of the broader measures are ultimately wound down as we start to emerge from the pandemic.
Are you seeing any of the major associations that support the sector doing any advocating or putting forward any of these ideas?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in all countries, the bodies that represent hotels, accommodation, hospitality, in more general terms, are working incredibly hard at the moment and lobbying government to try and make sure that the sector is heard. Of course, they're lobbying hard, but against a lot of other sectors and industries that are in pretty dire straits as well. But certainly the response that, or the feedback that I'm hearing from a lot of owners and operators is very positive in terms of the support they are receiving from trade bodies, and that interests are very much aligned. So I think there's a positive to be taken from that.
Eva, what do you think?
I think in the short term, the furlough scheme and other support to small businesses, it will help from the cost side. But then I think in the long term, in the long run, the government could help in bringing in demand to the destination. So, for example, just to give you an example, in Saudi Arabia, they are setting up a $7 billion tourism development fund, which will help the tourism business and promote the country as a tourism destination. In Italy as well, they have provided some holiday vouchers to the citizens to spend in accommodation. And some of the countries, they could, I think in the past, for example, in the case of Hong Kong, when they were suffering from SARS, what happened was they have relieved their visa restrictions from mainland China, which have helped tremendously for the hotel industry. So I guess these are some of the measures. Well, there are measures that help with cost, but then there are also long-term that will help with demand, and that will be a huge help to the hospitality industry.
What I would like to add, there's one thing that looking ahead would help all of us in tourism, which is a more coordinated approach to what the entry restrictions, or actually non-restrictions, are to traveling across borders, because that is obviously something that's one of the biggest drawdowns on tourism currently. Now, we will be in, whether there's a vaccination soon or not, we will be in the sort of interim state before there's a widespread immunity, where we need to have coordinated entrance requirements to countries Think about immunity passports, vaccination passports, whatever you call them. Think about coordinated testing at airports or on airplanes. Lufthansa announced yesterday that they're testing on flight or prior to the flight on certain test flights. These are programs, I think, that come at a much lower cost eventually than aiding all the industries that suffer from an infection spread and can contain the virus efficiently, but it needs to be an internationally coordinated effort. And that is something I'm hoping for, because what good is it to have a vaccination if travel restrictions remain in place? Then we're still bound to work with the little domestic demand that countries offer. We need international travel to resurface, and that is a question of how we manage entrance restrictions.
I agree. Moritz, do you want to weigh in on government assistance at this time and what the trade associations are doing to support the industry?
Yeah, from those associations that I've been in contact with, I know that they've been trying very hard. At the same time, obviously, also the lobby that the hospitality industry has in comparison, I don't know, for instance, the car lobby in Germany is quite different. Or also Lufthansa seems to be having a much stronger lobby, which I understand because there is some crucial factors to having a strong airline within the country. But I'm just glad that the first governments, at least looking at Austria and Germany, like Michael explains, seem to start moving now and seem to start acting on it. Since April, I strongly had the feeling that a whole industry is being left in the rain, while in other industries, various things were happening. And my thought was simply that I thought that some people in the government might have the feeling that the hotel is going to remain there. There might be another operator once business comes back, and similar, I think, for the restaurants of this world, that these are not the type of jobs that are going to go into other countries or other regions of the world quite quickly, which is maybe a reason why help wasn't there as quickly as in other industries. But I'm glad that at least for the first governments, there seem to be some movement now and things are heading in the right direction. And I think the hospitality industry needs it. And I just hope that this is going to go through, and because it would help the industry as a whole and would ensure that many great businesses that have invested a lot of time, a lot of passion into their hotels get a chance to restart it next year. And I think otherwise we would lose a lot of what makes all countries a very interesting spots to visit. And so I just hope that things are now keep on moving in the right direction there.
Thank you. In our last couple minutes, I'll just one of the questions coming in from in the chat area is, I think this is probably for all of you. Do you think that creating digital copy of accommodations using technology such as VR and VR tours will help give consumer confidence to booking? Let's go to you, Eva, first.
So is it the question is having virtual reality, for example, like on the website, and that will help clarify the state of the hotel, which gives confidence to the travelers?
I believe that's it. And tours, virtual reality tours of the property, maybe of the area as well, to help give them confidence to book and to come.
I guess in the interim, while it's difficult to travel to a destination to see a hotel, I'm thinking for businesses and conferences, this could be a solution in order to show the facilities and the state of the hotel to see whether or not it is suitable for their purpose. But I guess in the long run, I guess at the end of the day, is still the human interaction when you go to the hotel to visit the site that will still remains there. But I think virtual reality will help as a first step.
Okay. We've got 2 minutes left. I give 30 seconds to you, Michael, to answer on whether you think the virtual reality is something that will help give confidence to travelers.
I don't think it will generate demand. I think it will help to make the right decision and a more educated decision between the options once you've decided to travel. Indeed, that could be.
Okay, and Moritz, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think it's not gonna help you right now with regards to everything around COVID and securities that you need to put in place there, because I think there are way too many touch points in the guest journey, like the flight, the transportation, and everything until you're at the property. it's still a pretty fancy and cool thing to use. So I think going forward, we're going to see a wider market adoption. I would probably, as a hotel, only go into it and support a lot of things in that direction once the market adoption is a bit higher than what we have right now.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really cool idea, and we're seeing kind of virtual tours of commercial real estate, for example, which is supporting sales processes at the moment at a time when people can't physically go and see properties. That said, I think, you know, it's hard to really overcome the strength of word of mouth. So when you've got TripAdvisor and, dare I say it, Instagram, with people kind of posting live pictures and videos and providing, you know, immediate kind of feedback in real time, I think that's still going to be a huge driver of the decision process.
Thank you. I just want to give you all the results of the poll. 87% of the people that responded believe that safety and security concerns and the offering a high standard of COVID care would be a product that would increase their willingness to travel. And of those, the price was 53% believed that a price of $30 per person would do it, and 34% said $50. So there's an interesting product that you all might want to think about, is offering some safety and security addition to your booking opportunities. And with that, I want to thank all of you very much for your time, and I wish you well and to stay safe and happy. And thank you again for your valued contributions.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.